He's been to many of our events. You might know him as a technologist who writes for Extreme Tech, or photographer who takes people on safaris. But he's also been a very important advisor to Stanford and to faculty and students here, many of the students here. He's been advising in our research groups. And really grateful for him finding the speaker for today. So I'm going to turn it over to Dave. So
Great, thanks, Joyce. Thanks, it's great to see such a good turnout. Hopefully everybody's excited as I am, because we've had a bunch of talks on the theoretical aspects of self-driving cars and vision and how the two relate. But what's been a little frustrating to me, at least, is we haven't been able to put all that together and see, okay, in practice, what does it take to actually build a car that can see? And that's why I was really happy when I twisted the arm of my friend Sasha Ostishit. Wow. I can't say it right. I butchered his last name. Say your last name?
Ostojic.
Ostojic. All right, that time I got it. Who's the CTO at Cruise Automation, and he volunteered some of his team to come down and share with us today. Peter Gao, the speaker, he's the lead in their hardware and software for the vision system for the car. And then also Clement and Matthias are going to be with us afterwards at the reception, so if you want to buttonhole them and ask questions, you can. And with that, I'm going to ask Sasha to come up and say a couple words about Cruise, and then Peter will talk to us.
All right, yeah, so Cruise is not a well-known name in the autonomous driving space, but we are owned by General Motors, and we are by far the smallest team in the industry. And I'm going to make a claim, by far the most advanced team in terms of the capability we demonstrated so far. Peter will show you some of the videos driving in San Francisco in the most challenging urban environment you can imagine, with double parked cars, jaywalkers, bicyclists, and raccoons, and I don't know, everything. We've seen it all. And thanks to our amazing computer vision team, LiDAR team, sensor processing, perception team, and so forth, we have been able to achieve an amazing level of capability in terms of maneuvers we're able to do in fully autonomous mode. We published some videos that are available. You guys can Google them, or Peter's going to show them, that show basically completely autonomous driving for quite a long periods of time in San Francisco, and nobody else has demonstrated that yet. So the first video we published is the output of basically maybe 50 to 60 engineers. That's it, and you'll see what capability that is. We've grown since, and we're growing, and we're hiring, and it's just an amazing time to be in this space. I'll turn it over to Peter. He heads our computer vision team. All right, Peter.
So I'm going to introduce someone else first. So yeah, hi, I'm Peter. I do the computer vision stuff at Cruise. So yeah, I just want to first give a little breakdown of the history of the company and the stuff we've worked on before. So Cruise was started somewhere in like 2014. It was part of YC's Winter 14 batch. We started off doing highway autopilot. So if you think about, like, you're driving on the highway, you have these cameras on top and the radar in front to be able to stay within your lane and to be able to detect obstacles in front of you. This is us giving a demo to a reporter. She's very excited.
Oh my gosh, it's like twitching.
Yeah, it's just making minor corrections as it notices us drifting to the left or to the right.
Wait, you're sitting, your feet are not on any pedals, your hands are not on any wheels,
that was
and you're going
primarily
to...
a camera and radar system. This is sort of one of the visualizations that we use to do the lane tracking to the front and the back. And yeah, it was a pretty cool product, but we decided about a year and a half, 2 years ago, to start switching to fully autonomous driving. So we switched from these Audis before to Nissan Leafs. So this is me standing next to Scarlett. We named all of them after Marvel characters. And this is our old office. It's really cramped. This is Andre 3000. This is Big Boy. This is Scarlett. This is Quicksilver. So these two are the autonomous cars. These two in the back are the mapping cars. And then we moved offices eventually. So we're in this really big space on 11th and Howard. And when we first moved in, it was just a lot of empty space. Here's the Audis, the mapping cars. That's Gargoyle, Storm, Iron Man getting built up. So yeah, we had done that for a while. We did a demo in 2015, end of 2015, that was sort of driving around Mission Bay, which I think is the SF equivalent of Mountain View. So here's us like yielding to pedestrians, navigating traffic lights. countering obstacles, it's sort of navigating the world intelligently, doing turns and stuff like that, is sort of the basic self-driving maneuvers in an urban environment. You'll note that there's LiDAR on the right side, and those are the camera views on the left side. So we added the LiDAR in order to do this urban self-driving capability. So yeah, it's pretty cool. And then we got acquired last March. So that's Dan Kahn on the left, our COO. That's Kyle in the middle, Kyle Vogt, our CEO. And on the right side, Dan Amon from GM, who's the president who bought us from GM. And after that happened, we started having a lot more cars. So we have like no space in the garage anymore. These are all Chevy Bolts that we sort of got in the mail after we got acquired. This is Gargoyle, so the gold tech. And we started retrofitting our tech to the tops of these new cars. And they're really cool cars. People ask me like, what changed the most after the acquisition? I would say the biggest thing is that you don't have to do horrible things to control the car. When you don't own the cars, you're not part of the manufacturer, you got to rip out the steering column, put in your own motors, you got to put like little cables on the brake and the gas pedal to actuate them. But when you're part of the manufacturer, you get a lot cooler stuff. You can just plug into the CAN port on the dash of the car and suddenly you have over-the-wire access to all the controls, which makes things a lot simpler, a lot easier to control. Also, the Bolt's just a really cool car. It's got like 200 miles of range. You should buy it. But yeah, we used to run out of juice on the Leafs, so we had like gasoline cars because they had no range. So we'd have cases where we're out of power and we're pushing a car up a hill to get to a charging station, but with the Bolts, it's not an issue anymore. So I want to give some motivation at least to the environment that we're driving in. San Francisco is a pretty dense environment. You can see there's a biker going past. We spend a lot of time on bike protection, so we don't do like right hook turns across bike lanes, and to make sure that we're not going to swerve into people. You can see there's a construction worker crossing the road. We're doing an unprotected left turn here across construction, and we sort of nose into the intersection. We yield, we go. There's pedestrians everywhere, cars everywhere. There's clutter on the sides of the road. San Francisco is a really tough urban driving environment. And I say this is really important because the incidence of just crazy stuff that happens is a lot higher. There's a lot more agents in the world that you have to track, you have to predict, you have to account for when you're deciding what to do in the actions of the car. So of course, also hills. We don't really have that many hills down here in Mountain View, but they're all over the place there. And this is sort of just navigating to a pullover point, at which point we can drop off or pick up a passenger, stuff like that. San Francisco also has just really crazy drivers. This is also part of the video that we released publicly. And we're doing a straight. This guy in front of us is doing a unprotected left turn, and we just want to go straight, right? But what happens is someone behind us gets impatient, and they try to zoom around, and they almost get, hit by an oncoming car that's turning left across our lane. And just because this guy was impatient, he didn't see something, and suddenly this guy in the front who's trying to turn left suddenly just oh man, there's a car, and slams on the brakes, and that could have been a collision. That could have been really crazy. So there's a lot of stuff going on in San Francisco. It's a really tough environment, and you have to deal with a lot of crazy drivers and social behavior and all that. So I just want to motivate that this is a really tough driving environment that we spend a lot of time to get working. So why self-driving cars? So Cruise's goal, Cruise's mission is to build and ship safe self-driving cars at scale. And the number one thing about why we want to do this is safety. Millions of people, 1.3 million a year actually, die from road crashes. It's the 9th leading cause of death globally. And it's crazy that this is acceptable. When the technology is there to make this so much lower, even reduce it to 0. But the technology has to be there to make this possible. It has to be out in the world, deployed at scale to make a difference. Second of all is productivity. I'm sure everyone here has commuted half an hour every day to get to their workplace or to their, to the university or something like that. Self-driving cars make things a lot more efficient, especially when they're running a rideshare model. You don't have to spend all this time behind the wheel. You don't have to park because then it can pick up other people, and therefore you have less car utilization. Less cars on the road, higher car utilization per car, and it just saves a lot for the environment, saves a lot for people's efficiency and time to get places. I would say the last thing that people really overlook with self-driving cars is that it's really cool. It's the future. This is the first production scale deployment of robotics technology that's going to make a huge difference in people's lives, I would say. So. Yeah, so self-driving cars are robots. So it merits talking a little bit about the robotics field in general. What in robotics, like what makes the left side of this chart, you know, an elevator and monorail a lot more difficult than, for example, grasping arbitrary objects or building a self-driving car? And my argument is the biggest thing is structure. On the left side, you have environments that are very constrained. They're constrained because you don't have people rushing into the road, and you also have this track that tells you where you can go, and you can operate essentially in that one dimension. Whereas on the right side, when you have grasping, you have all sorts of things that you could potentially have to pick up, and you don't really know what to do or how to like handle them generally. And in the case of self-driving cars, you have a sort of semi-structured environment. When you're driving on the road, there's actually lane markings and signs and stuff like that that impose rules on the road, impose structure on the world. But the difficulty with a lot of self-driving car programs, because like they've been around since the 50s, is that it's hard to get that structure into the system. It's hard to interpret the world and be able to reason intelligently about it. So a lot of the previous attempts would try to embed structure inside of the world. They would put like, you know, magnets under the road, and then it would be easier to read from the car itself. But this requires huge changes to physical infrastructure, which is very expensive, which is why these programs never really took off. But the state of perception technology has gotten to the point nowadays where it's feasible to read a lot of things like traffic lights and road lines and stuff like that off the road while you're moving. So, you know, that's still not good enough. We want to do better than that. Even though we could perceive all the lane lines at runtime, even though we could, for example, figure out what traffic lights link to each lane on runtime, you know, it's not reliable. And this stuff doesn't really change that often. So you have maps to make your job a lot easier, and they're super, super useful. So on the left side is sort of the normal Google Maps sort of level of detail where you have lane level information going one way, but it can't really tell you within, say, a meter of where you are, and it doesn't have information on each lane within each road. Whereas we collect these really, really high resolution maps that tell you what traffic lights link to which way, what lanes connect to which lane. And this is really useful because the irony is physical infrastructure doesn't change that much. So you can build a map ahead of time, and since the physical infrastructure that underlies the map doesn't change that much, then it stays relatively constant, and you can detect the changes when they happen, when there's road repainting or construction, and update small sections of the map accordingly. But it makes your problem so much easier. You can do localization better, you can do perception better, and it reduces a lot of the variability and risk that you would have to expose yourself to if you were to figure this all out at runtime. So let's talk a little bit about what it takes to build a self-driving car. Why is it different than building, say, a web app at Facebook? And there's a few considerations that I think are sort of up there in terms of priority. The number one thing is low latency. So when you're dealing with a human driver, humans have a reaction time of around half a second for simple tasks. But for complex tasks, like if you're in a driving environment or you're distracted or something, it can be more than 1 second. But this sort of places a good bound of where you want your car's perception latency and actually operation latency, end-to-end latency to be. Because you want the car to be faster than a human, or at least on the leading edge of the human's reaction time if you want it to be better than a human. So this means that you can't put your processing offline. You can't put it into the cloud because just the network delay would just be too much to be able to process things in real time. The second thing is that your algorithms have to be correct. If you think about any sort of system, it's hard to get 100% accuracy in every single dimension. But what you could do is you can analyze the system overall, and you'll see that especially when you have self-driving cars and sort of these safety critical things, the thing you really want to avoid is system-level false negatives. What does that mean? If you don't see a pedestrian or you don't see a car, that is a system-level false negative. Because it's really bad, you might hit that person, right? Whereas false positives sort of trigger a different behavior where maybe you slow down or hit the brakes a little bit, but it's not as disastrous because you can usually recover and keep going again. But you have to be very confident about what performance you want from your algorithms and to be able to verify that your algorithms meet that level of performance. Well, how do you determine the levels of performance? You have a testing team to analyze your maneuvers and set bounds. And how do you evaluate it? You have to collect testing sets, you have to do simulations, you have to do a lot of sort of putting your ducks in the row. And I think the last thing that's really important is robustness. Because your compute is pretty much all on the car, and you're not having it in like a server rack in like an AWS data center somewhere, like it's really important that you're robust to the various things that come about when you have a computer in the back of a car going down a road at 25 miles an hour that's bumpy. It could be hot, it could be cold. So you have to make sure that your software is okay by designing safety systems to make sure everything runs on time, runs correctly. You have to be able to do hardware and software redundancy, for example, when you have a sensor go down, and be able to take remedial action, like slow down or pull over to the side of the road. So yeah, let's talk a little bit more about the car itself. So this is FOSSA. This is one of our self-driving cars. And I want to talk a little bit more about the perception systems on the car. So there's a lot of sensors on the car. There's like an IMU, there's like wheel odometry, there's some more exotic stuff. But the main sensing systems that it uses right now to get through the world are LiDARs, cameras, and radars. And I want to note that this is very different from when a human drives. You know, if you think about it, a human has a dual stereo system mounted on this articulating mount, and they have essentially an IMU with their inner ear. But the car sees the world, perceives the world differently. But I would say it perceives the world in a better way. I would argue that if you were able to shoot lasers from your eyes, you would probably be a better driver too. So yeah, let's talk about each of those sensor systems in detail. LiDAR is the big spinny thing you see on top. It's pretty well used in every single self-driving car program. This is one of our mapping cars driving around. There's some palm trees if you want to guess where it is. But it essentially shoots out laser beams into the world, waits to see how much time it takes for them to reflect back, and then uses that to determine how far things are. And so it can assemble these 3D point clouds that are really beautiful. The colors here are actually intensity from the LiDAR returns. And it's really great because it has high accuracy in terms of direction and distance. And it's sort of like a camera with depth and intensity channels. The problem is that it's pretty sparse. So the average LiDAR has something between 16 and 128 vertical beams. And so this is a lot less than the other systems that we can use. But the great thing is that it gives you these great 3D point clouds, and that depth of information is just really critical. So the other really, so you can also see LiDAR scans in real life. If you take your camera and you take off the IR filter and you point them at a LiDAR, you can actually see this is the LiDAR spinning around inside of its enclosure, and it's shooting out these laser beams onto the ground, and it produces these stripes, which is super cool. It's like a rave.
It's a white one.
This is the camera system. So the camera system, sort of like everyone knows intuitively what cameras are, but their advantages compared to other self-driving car sensor systems mainly is like the resolution is so great. It's like 1280 by 800, 920 by 1080. You know, it's just got a lot of pixels compared to a LiDAR that has a vertical resolution of something like 16 to 128. It's also got really rich data in the sense that it gets RGB. So there's certain things like road lights, you know, like street signs and stuff like that that the LiDAR can't see. But you know, since humans perceive the world through the visual space and the cameras capture that visual space, you can see that in the camera. Downsides, doesn't have depth. That's a big downside. So our third sensor system is radar. So radar's main advantage is that it sees super, super, super far, like 100 plus meters. So it's great at measuring distance, but it's not as good for yaw. And it's a 2D sensor, so you can sort of like see it from the planar top-down view here. The white dots are moving objects, and the black objects are stationary objects, and you can tell why it's moving or not because the radars have Doppler returns, which is also a really great thing that the other sensors don't have. The problem is it doesn't really see anything but cars and heavily metallic objects. So it's not as good for things like pedestrians, unless they're wearing aluminum foil, which we've seen. Our office is right next to DNA Lounge, so you get like really fun stuff. I think the guy was like dressed up like a fireman. So yeah, this is sort of like self-driving cars in general. So I want to talk a little bit more about how computer vision factors into the way that a self-driving car maneuvers and sees the world. And so I'd like to draw a comparison to computer vision that most people do, I think, in academia or in web tech and stuff like that. My background was more doing this isolated machine learning, deep learning for computer vision. And you know, when you come into the self-driving car field, it's really interesting because you have access to all parts of the pipeline. You know, when you interact with something like ImageNet, you just get the images, right? And they're already processed for you, they're already rectified and everything. And you sort of just deal with the machine learning and the deep learning on top of it. So that really means that the only solutions you can have to problems are all in software. But when you're in a field like robotics, you have access to everything. You have the cameras and the hardware, you have the settings of the cameras, you can process them any way you wish. And so that opens a lot of really interesting ways to solve problems that you wouldn't have if you just thought about it from the software side. But in the end, it goes back to pragmatism. We want these cars to go, we want these cars to be reliable and to be safe. So you gotta think about, okay, given time constraints, given the problem domain, what is the size of our data sets? How much data can we collect? How difficult is it to label? You have to consider all these things before you start tackling your problem and using one approach or the other. So, why cameras? So a lot of teams in, for example, the DARPA Grand Challenge, the DARPA Urban Challenge, tried to rely heavily on vision at the time, but it showed there was a lot of really fundamental limitations. And I think a lot of self-driving car teams now are more LiDAR based, but the quality of computer vision and cameras in general has gotten a lot better. And part of that is because of the sensors. Back then, you'd have cameras that would look into, for example, the sun shining into your eyes, or nighttime, or things like that, and they would just fail. You couldn't see anything. But now you have these automotive grade sensors that are really great. They have huge dynamic range, and they allow you to use the camera in a lot more situations than you previously could. You also have better compute. Back in the day, you would have to shove server racks full of CPUs into the back of your trunk and then use them to process, for example, stereo or something like that. But now you have a lot of really exotic hardware. GPUs have gotten a lot stronger. You also have things like the TPU and ASICs, FPGAs that are really great, that speed up your algorithms and make it feasible to fit a lot of compute in the back of your trunk. And the last thing, which is actually the most interesting to me, is that the algorithms have gotten a lot better. The DARPA Grand Challenge was back in 2007, and AlexNet came onto the scene in 2012. So the actual processing of the data has gotten a lot better. Computer vision really started to work after deep learning came onto the scene. And that's enabled a lot of things that we probably couldn't have done before. So let's talk about hardware. Some sort of boring stuff that people don't think about that's still sort of critical when you're doing the self-driving car problem is the hardware. First of all, you can't just put 10 DSLRs on the car because they're really big, they suck power, they can't record for any period of time. So you have to think about the form factor. And because of that, you have to think about things like, what is the camera's durability and reliability, not only on its resistance to shock, to cold, to heat, but also things like, what is the USB or Ethernet support of a Linux driver, right? How is it going to work in different conditions? And you also have to worry about second order things. Does your machine have enough compute to handle all these cameras? Does it have enough data rate to handle the bandwidth of stuff coming in? You have to have sufficient disk capacity to hold it for any period of time that's meaningful, and you also be able to write all this data to your disk, essentially 10 HD video streams at the same time to your disk in a way that can catch up to the real-time processing. And there's also sort of still limitations with cameras. They're not at the point where they're the same as the human's eye in terms of quality. So you have to consider things like, what is the dynamic range of a camera? If you have a camera set at a certain exposure setting, what is the brightest bright it can see? What's the darkest dark it can see? You also think about color balance with things like traffic lights, where it depends very heavily on the color. You have to think about things like your shutter speed and how you can command it so that you don't see things like LED flicker when your shutter rate is too high. So in this case, we have a camera that's tuned for looking at objects. So you can see this is under an underpass, this is at night, it's super dark, and so the camera's shutter speed has gone really high to be able to see all this dark stuff. And so you can see the pedestrians, you can see the cars on the other side of the intersection, but the problem is now those traffic lights are saturated. You can't tell what color it is, and it's just white because it's exceeded the dynamic range of the camera itself. But if you do some tuning on the cameras, or if you choose some different hardware, you can tune it so that you see these vehicle signals like the brake lights, you can see the street lights, you can see the traffic light at the distance right there perfectly well, and the color is right and everything. And so this is interesting, I think, because vehicle signals and traffic lights and stuff like that, they actually don't change their brightness regardless of your time of day, whereas the ambient lighting changes all the time when you're trying to see pedestrians and stuff like that. So you can tune the hardware for certain problems if you want to solve them in a lot easier ways. So now we have the hardware, so we have to set it up on the software side to be able to use for your actual algorithms. So the first thing is calibration. So when you think about calibration, there's sort of intrinsic and extrinsic calibration. So this is intrinsic calibration. This is Henry, one of our vehicle techs, waving a checkerboard in front of the car's camera to calibrate the intrinsics. I used to do this for a long time. I'm really happy he's doing it now because it's really painful. But now I don't get bicep workouts. But yeah, the way that you're supposed to do this is that intrinsic parameters are essentially accounting for the distortion of the camera. So if you see right there on the top edge, you see those power lines, right? In reality, they're actually straight, but because of the distortion of the camera lens, they're actually a little bit bent. And so what you can do is you can estimate the intrinsic parameters and correct for it with rectification, and now the lines are straight as they are in reality. So that's intrinsic calibration. The next step is extrinsic calibration, which is calibrating your camera to the rest of the car. And this is super important so that you can go back and forth between the different sensors and do really good sensor fusion. So this is the spatial intrinsics. You can calibrate the camera to the LiDAR, and you can see that the edges in the LiDAR, those like green and red strips that are colored by distance, match up with the edges of the camera image to show that they are aligned extrinsically. So that's super cool. But the other thing that you have to do is to align them temporally, because you want your cameras to capture an area around the same time that the LiDAR is spinning over it, so you have good alignment between the point clouds and the image. So what you can do is you can do this thing called phase locking, which is to schedule the LiDARs to arrive at a certain point in the rotation at a certain period of time. So what you can do is you can capture camera frames in different parts of the LiDAR scan as the LiDAR is scanning over it, so you have good temporal calibration. And then now you have all this data from the hardware that's coming into your pipeline, and you have to do something with it. So we have labeling, and labeling is really important not only for machine learning algorithms as training data, but also for validation, to make sure that if you have a heuristic algorithm that's doing the thing that you want. So on the left side, there's a 2.5D labeling view. That's for objects. On the right side, there's a 3D labeling view for traffic lights. This is our image labeling view. You draw bounding boxes around things like signs, pedestrians, cars, and anything of interest. Here's a patch view of a lot of the bicyclists that we've seen over time. So this is super, super important. And now you have all this data that you've made sense of, at least with human or human-assisted labeling, and you have to make sense of it. These cars generate hundreds and hundreds of terabytes every single day, and this is just in one office, and we're going to be increasing the number of cars. We're going to increase the resolution of the cameras and the hardware and everything. And so there's just a lot of data that you got to move around, that you got to be able to query, you got to be able to process. And so there's a lot of really cool big data stuff that we're using. We're using Spark for it right now, and there's all sorts of other technologies that we're thinking of using. And it's great. You can do things like querying, you can do things like multi-model training, multi-machine training, rather. So yeah, that's also really important. So now we have all the infrastructure set up. We have all the hardware, we have the calibration, we have all the processing infrastructure, and now we can deal with the actual problems. So traffic lights is the first thing. This is a category of things that cameras and only cameras can do. You can't see this in LiDAR, you can't see this in radar. And so it's critical that it's really, really good. So this is actually a difficult scenario. I saw on Hacker News someone said like, oh, self-driving cars are easy. If light equals green, then go. That's all you need to do. Simplest thing in the world. But no, it's not that easy. Number one, you have the sun shining into your eyes. What do you do about that? Second of all, you have to be able to distinguish the different types of bulbs in order to determine your behavior correctly. So here we have mission going onto Van Ness. We see there's actually a green bulb and a green arrow that controls our lane. And so if you were to just detect the bulb equals green, you would probably yield to this oncoming lane of traffic on your left, and you would just get stuck there. It's horrible. So there's sort of like this theme that I see a lot with all the systems that we build, which is that you can do the first 80, 90, 95, 99% really easily. And then the 1% that remains is the long tail things that's really difficult. And traffic lights is one illustration of this. 80%, 90% of lights in San Francisco are type 1 lights that you see over here, just red, yellow, green bulbs. But there's all sorts of weird stuff. There's all sorts of really weird traffic lights that are not in the manual, they're not specified in any sort of government regulation, but you just come across them on the road and you gotta handle them. So there's U-turn arrows, diagonal arrows, everything in Chinatown turns into flashing red bulbs after 10 o'clock. There's muni lights, so you gotta handle all sorts of stuff. The long tail is really long. And this is another sort of application that only cameras can see. This is vehicle light detection. So it's important to be able to determine people's intent from their vehicle lights. So you can see here, this guy's got his hazards on. So he's probably a double parked car. You don't want to wait behind this guy forever because you'll just get stuck. So you can do the same thing for turn signals, for brake lights, for reverse lights, headlights, and stuff like that. It's really important. But you know, there's also a long tail. Like, there's all sorts of really weird configurations of taillights. So this UPS truck is flashing its left and right turn signals intermittently as it's like got its hazards lights on. Like, why is it doing that? And then, you know, there's this thing on Wikipedia that's like a Thai tour bus. It's got like 50 freaking bulbs. Like, what are they for? You know, like the long tail is really long. And then there's also stuff like this. You know, you see in Europe, I think this is illegal in the US. I hope it's illegal in the US. This is a turn signal. Why are they doing this? Like, why isn't it just flashing like everything else, you know? But, you know, you got to deal with all this, right? Because if you don't deal with all this, then, you know, you're missing out on things that the car could perform unsafely on. So you got to tackle all this stuff. You got to tackle it safely. So now we're going to move into the domain of things that the camera can do, but also other sensors can do, but the camera does better, or can help out. So this is an example of object detection. So we see, for example, things in the world that we care about, construction objects, cars, trucks, things like that. We see there's a guy over here on the left side walking along the road. And you wouldn't actually think it from this image, but this is a really tough scenario for LiDAR because this left side is a construction zone and it's super, super cluttered. So when you're looking at the LiDAR data that's very sparse, it's super hard to pick this guy out of the background. But when you look at it in the camera space, it's like, whoa, there's a dude walking over there. It's easy to track him. And if you correlate it with like other data, you can also estimate the depth. So that's really cool. And he's letting us go. There's also stuff like construction zones. Construction zones you can see in LiDAR, you can see in camera, but you know, the big thing is that construction zones are also very cluttered, and cones are orange, which makes them very easy to see in the vision space. There's also signs like that one on the right that you can't really tell what's going on with it when you're in LiDAR space, but if you're in camera space and you have sufficient resolution and range, you can see what's going on. So we're like navigating this line of cones very precariously. This took a few months to get right. But there's also a guy on this right side who's going to be walking into our path, and the car sees this and it freaks out. It's like, woo, like, you know, he's going to walk into our path. So we slow down until he's stationary, lets us go. Safe. So I mentioned before that latency is really critical. I think this is one of the cases that illustrates that very clearly. This is midnight in Castro, and everyone's drunk. And this dude's got a handle in his hand, and he's like, bro, self-driving car, look at that, bro. And so, you know, his friend is trying to stop it. And he's like, come on, this is fine, it's fine, it's fine. The human car goes, and then, my God, if you have any latency that's more than a second, like, you're gonna hit the guy. And, you know, like, why is he doing this? But, like, you know, it's important. You can't let this stuff escape. This is his friend. So we have a lot of other cameras, so we see at the same time he's doing this, we're looking at the other camera, and the other guy's just like, why? There's also stuff that you can't really prepare for in terms of the discrete classes that you think of beforehand. There's just going to be things that defy your classifications you still got to handle. So, you know, we're going to be releasing another video soon that has us driving for like an hour and a half without takeovers, actually. And there's one section of it where the car is actually stopping for a raccoon. So you can either make a raccoon classifier, or you can make the system general enough that you can understand things that you don't expect to see, like this guy. So, you know, we actually, in this case, we see him like, you know, pushing forward, and we also see the hazard lights. So when it comes to a stop and we see the hazard lights, we're like, oh, you know, this guy's stuck, we should go around. But we're actually trying to turn left. So we're sort of like nudging into another lane to say like, oh, we're gonna like turn right, and then they start pushing it again. And then we're like, oh, well, this guy's moving again, and we wanna turn left, so we don't have to lane change anymore, so we cancel the maneuver and we keep going. Wait at the stoplight for a little bit.
Is the car canceling the maneuver, or you're canceling the maneuver?
Oh, the car's canceling the maneuver, okay. Yeah. And it goes, and I guess there's a gas station down the street. Clear the crosswalk, we go, we're on our merry way. But you know, it's important to note that all the stuff that you do in the camera space doesn't have depth, which is a real problem. Stereo also has problems because if you want to be able to see at any appreciable distance, you gotta have really just ridiculously wide baselines, which is a problem. You can't mount that 360 degrees. So what you have to do is take these 2D camera detections and somehow convert them into 3D, because the rest of the car is operating in 3D. So what you can do is you have those detections on the left side, and you can correlate them to other sensor features or to the map, and convert them into a 3D format that the rest of the system will recognize and be able to plan around. So this is an example of like the 3D view of the world that we use for debugging. It has more our real visualizations have more markers. This is sort of sanitized for public consumption, but we do LiDAR classification, we do visual classification. This is sort of the aggregated output of all of that in the end. And you can see we see these humans on the other side of the road. We put a stop point in the crosswalk to yield for them. Once they clear the crosswalk, we're like, okay, go. There's like cars around, poles around, things like that. It's important to be able to classify what things are in order to predict them into the future better, because cars might behave differently from pedestrians and cyclists and stuff like that. That blue path is the path that our car is planning to take. The left and right boundaries are the lane boundaries we want to stay within. That comes from the map. You can think about it as sort of like virtual train tracks, and our car is driving on these virtual train tracks of the world. But the real difficulty comes along when you have the times when you don't want to listen to the virtual train tracks, when you have, for example, construction zones and stuff like that, where you have to defy the normal rules and go rogue to get around obstacles. Optimizing model performance. So I come from a more deep learning background, but I just want to note that we don't just do machine learning for everything. There's times to use heuristic techniques. There's times to use learning techniques. But at least like you're concerned with the model's speed, which is one form of performance, and the model's accuracy, which is another form of performance. So when you're optimizing for accuracy, there's a lot of stuff you can do, like collect more data. If you collect a bunch of data, the performance of the classifier usually gets a lot better. But you can do stuff like hyperparameter tuning, architecture tuning, examining the data and configuring the network to be better at predicting things from it. There's also things like you can do for model performance's speed. There's GPU tricks, there's exotic hardware. You can make the code itself faster by rewriting layers and doing stuff like that. Or you can make the model itself faster by doing some judicious stuff with the way that the architecture represents data. So that's all really cool. We spent a lot of time on that. So in the end, all these perception inputs, these camera inputs are combined with, for example, LiDAR inputs, radar inputs, and they get fused together, and this is presented as this ground truth sort of view of the world to the planning system. And the planning control system then decides to do maneuvers and has certain functionality and behavior that it can enable using that information. So this is an example of a DPV oncoming maneuver. This is when we see a double parked car and we want to get into the oncoming lane to go around. So we peek out our nose to say, okay, like let's make sure that's not clear, or it's clear to make sure that we can go. This guy yields for us and we say, oh, well, it's clear, let's go around. This took a lot of time to do. But yeah, there's a lot of double parked cars in San Francisco, like comically like large number of double parked cars, and it's illegal, that's the best part. But since like they're there, you gotta deal with it. This is a DPV lane change where we see a DPV and we're like, okay, we wanna go around, and then we DPV lane change into another double parked car in the other lane. So we decide to go. And we see this guy walking his cute dog. And there's another double parked car. So this guy doesn't have hazards on, so we wait a little bit to make sure this guy is double parked instead of just, you know, waiting for another car in front. And then we try to initiate a lane change. This guy's like, yo, look at this self-driving car, man. But there's a lot of cars on the right side, so we can't do it. There's that biker, you know, the driver's wondering, like, why are we stopped? And then the biker zooms past and it's like, oh, that's why it stops. And then we did the lane change actually pretty assertively. There's a Muni bus that was trying to get around the car behind us, and we cut in front of him in order to assert ourselves, and then we end up behind the popo. This is another maneuver that took a lot of time to perfect. This is an unprotected left. So this is when you have like a green bulb in front of you, but you want to turn left, you have to yield to oncoming traffic. I like this video a lot because there's a cameo of a cruise car. Another cruise car. We have like so many cruise cars now going around San Francisco. They catch each other on cameras all the time. They have like selfies and everything. But yeah, you know, now we have these oncoming cars, so we need to yield to them, make sure it's clear to go. We can see everything. We're not going to hit by any oncoming cars. And boom, we commit. Commit, commit, commit. You see the yellow light over there. So you have to nudge your nose out into the intersection to show people that you're serious about doing this, and then when the light turns red, you can do the turn. It's just like the way that people do turns.
How many reversing behaviors do you support?
How many?
Yeah, I mean, which...
I don't know what that means.
Which cases will you reverse?
I can't say, but we do reverse. Yeah. especially when you end up like too close to a double parked car or something, you need room to maneuver. This is something we learned when we were doing unprotected lefts. A lot of people actually, when they do unprotected lefts, they will go into the oncoming lane when they're waiting for people to clear the crosswalk. You're not supposed to do that. You're actually supposed to wait in the middle of the intersection, not in the oncoming lane blocking traffic until the crosswalk is clear, and then you can actually commit through. The taxi driver on the right side didn't get the memo, so he's just going when like the pedestrians are there, but we wait until the crosswalk is clear, and then we go. Another thing is construction. So the simpler construction problem is you have a line of cones in your lane somewhat, and you free space plan around it. But this is a sort of harder case where you have to recognize that your lane is actually blocked with construction. So the system gets hints. It sees that there's like the construction ahead diamond signs and everything. And then once it detects that there's a construction blockage in your lane, based on the classifications it gets from like all parts of the system, it says, all right, well, we should go around. So we wait for the cars to go past. You can see the LED flicker on that light in front of us. And we go around, and we're free. Yay, share the road. So yeah, that's most of what I got with respect to self-driving cars and computer vision. I want to pause here and say that we're hiring. If you're interested in working on self-driving cars, if you're interested in like building the future, if you're interested in actually doing something that will change the world and save lives in an appreciable way in a reasonable amount of time, we're here. You get to work on cool technology. It's not just for robotics people. If you know stuff about computer vision, controls, planning, that's great. But if you're interested in product, or you're interested in like back-end engineering or data engineering, stuff like that, we have roles for those too. We're sort of building the future of how people interact with their technology. If you think about a self-driving car, what does the user experience look like when you get into a self-driving car, get out of a self-driving car? That's really a lot of interesting questions. So we're hiring designers, front-end engineers, mobile engineers, all sorts of stuff. You can check out our jobs page if you're interested. One of the best perks we have, apart from the normal tech company stuff and free food, is that we have a cruise to work program. So if you live within the mapped area in San Francisco, you can call for a cruise car every day at a certain time, or we'll arrive at your house, you can get into the car, and it will drive you autonomously to work. So it's really fun. You can hop in a car whenever you want. There's also a Caltrain shuttle if you're coming from South Bay, but it's really fun. Just to give you a sense of our culture, we also had Hack Week last week, or 2 weeks ago, I think. So this is one of the projects that we built. In that direction, that pedestrian. So as you walk around the car, it'll change the lighting of the lights to follow you as you're walking around.
Get to the drop-off point.
Get to the drop-off point. That's a good point. So this is us when we get to a drop-off point. Since it's connected to the car computer, once you enter the drop-off point, you can actually flash the lights or alternate the lights to indicate to someone that, oh, this is the car you should get in. You can change the colors according to the passenger and stuff like that. It looks really dope. We also have location-aware drop-off coloring. So if you want to go to the Castro and drop someone off, we have a different color scheme. It was a lot of fun. We did this in like 2 days. Well, not me specifically. I worked on a sub-component of this. This is another project that we did last week. This is doing a robot arm for plugging a robotic, like plugging a charger into the car autonomously. You saw like a similar system that Tesla did, but we did this in 2 days. And it was really cool. There's a GoPro mount on the top of it. Kyle, our CEO, spent a lot of time on this product as well. It's got some great techno music. It's so slow. And we plug it in. Has a QR code on the side of it, so you can tell where the plug-in port is. Ding. close the port as well. Chevrolet. Yeah. All right, so yeah, that's all I got. So I'll open it up for Q&A. Before that though, I just want to get the screen onto a certain frame. This is Kyle. He's programming really hard. Perfect. All right. So I saw you first.
Okay. So what do you do about small children? You're in that situation, you have cars parked on both sides of the road, some small child's between two cars, he runs out in front of your vehicle. You can either hit the child or you could turn and hit something else. So how do you make a decision about what's more important, the child or your car? Should you smash the car and save the child, or?
Okay, so what do we do about children running into the road? So number one rule of what we do is don't hit anything. Don't hit anything. So that's basically what I would say. If you're ever in a situation where that happens, you shouldn't be in that situation.
You have to either turn or you can hit the child with the brakes on, but you're going to hit the child. You're 30 miles an hour, you can't stop fast enough.
So I think like this sort of links into the whole trolley problem. Everyone talks about the trolley problem. That's the most asked question I get every time I do an interview. And I think it's a little silly because if you're ever in that position to begin with, something is wrong. You know, like we saw cases where people are running into the road. We actually saw a case exactly like that where a kid was running into the road. And part of the thing you can do is you have to just stop fast enough. You have to detect it fast enough. You have to stop fast enough. But there's also things that you can do that are safe behaviors that could prevent these sort of scenarios in the first place. So after that scenario, we saw, oh, this is a crosswalk. We should slow down for crosswalks. We should reduce our velocity preemptively, regardless of whether we see something or not, when we're in that sort of situation.
Yeah, no crosswalk. This is the middle of the street.
Okay, but I can add two things. One is to have safe behaviors, like if you're driving next to a densely parked series of cars,
Right.
drive slower so you can react faster and brake faster. But the other thing is self-driving cars will not solve every single problem. There will be people on the streets, things will happen, but our main point is we will be way safer than any other scenario.
Right, you and the brown.
So staying away from the legal questions, I have a couple of challenge questions that sort of bug me. What do you do with snow covering everything? That's one. And what do you do with something like a plastic bag blowing across you in front of you on a freeway? You don't want to overreact in some cases.
Okay. What do we do with snow? What do we do with not solid objects that are into our way? So one of the interesting things that happened during the acquisition was we got acquired into GM, and we looked around their R&D department, and there was a lot of really, stuff that we couldn't use. But there was some really interesting stuff. There was some really interesting stuff that was super useful for the problems you describe, and I can't say too much about that. But yeah.
Can you say something about where you are safety-wise compared to humans? I mean, I know it's going to be off the record.
Compared to what?
To humans. Like,
to humans.
Are you 10x human safety record at this point, or 100x, or 1x? Where
Okay. How are we compared to human safety record? I don't think we've really done a really detailed study into it yet because we're still developing it. I think like around now is the point where we're going to start really critically diving into what it means to be safer than a human, because this is,
you get to take a wild guess.
I don't know. I don't want to take wild guesses. Yeah.
But we do publish our data and post it to DMV like everybody is registered about incidents.
So you're doing a lot of urban, relatively low speed driving right now in training. What about highway? What's your plan for doing highway testing?
Are we going to do highway? Yes, that's the answer. But we're focusing on the urban self-driving environment because that's the place where most rides happen in terms of ride sharing. So once we really nail that, I think we'll start really getting into higher speed driving and highway driving. Yes. So.
I have several questions. One is, when Trevor Darrow gave a talk, one of the questions somebody asked was, what about sensors? How dependent are you on the sensor? And he said, well, on deep learning, I'm hardware agnostic. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the hardware dependency that you have on the camera. And then the other question is, what are the challenging cases that you have right now? Because right now you're driving around, there's somebody in the car, so you know in what cases you fail, and what are those cases that are challenging for you? And,
okay.
Yeah.
So for point number one is, what about the hardware? How reliant are you on the hardware? I actually worked in Daryl's lab. I worked on Cafe for a while, so it's great that he came here and talked about this. I'm not sure what that means. Like, you know, if the hardware gets better, then we're going to get better. I think, like, in terms of deep learning, for example, it's relatively right. Like, features are transferable across all image domains. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to do classification on ImageNet because it comes from all sorts of different cameras. But we've noticed that it actually gets better when you optimize the network on a certain hardware, on a certain camera, which is really interesting. On your second point, what are we finding to be really difficult? So I can't speak too much about this, but I'll say that the more challenging aspects of self-driving cars are the places where structure breaks down. You know, you have these lane lines on the road, you have to usually stay on them, it's sort of like riding the virtual train tracks, but then there's certain times when you want to ignore that. When you see a construction zone, a line of cones that's across your area, then you have to be able to decide, okay, this is a point where it's okay to ignore the regular rules of the road, the lane boundaries essentially, and to engage in a different mode of behavior that's less structured. So I would say that's the biggest thing. Yeah.
Well, one other question, sorry. Do you create dangerous situations? Because if you're based everything on training and driving around, and you don't really have those cases where, you know, somebody...
Wait, do you create dangerous situations?
Yeah,
not on the road, my God.
I'm not talking about on the road, but there are situations which you would encounter rarely,
yes,
which would be dangerous. So how do you?
Oh, yeah, definitely. So we have a lot of really rigorous testing for this sort of stuff. If you see any sort of dangerous situation on the road, you can record it and you can keep it back afterwards and build regression testing on this. So one of the really cool things about self-driving cars, and I think in machines in general, is that as a human driver, you have a limited amount of experience, right? You only have your lifetime as, like, you know, probably from 16 onwards to actually draw upon when you're thinking about driving. Whereas these cars have like millions and millions of miles across all the fleet that they're gathering each day, and therefore the lessons that you can learn are transferable into the single code base, the single knowledge base. So you can train the car to be better than any human driver just because it sees more situations that a normal human driver would never be able to see or react to just because of our lifespan. So that's number one. I say number two is we have simulators. We have simulators to test out dangerous situations and see how our car would react without putting someone in front of it. Man, so many hands. Let's go with you.
How dependent are you on mapping? Do you have the ability to go into new communities and start driving? Or what is the challenge of driving without the maps?
Okay, how dependent are you on mapping? We are dependent on mapping. I'll say that. So, you know, as I said before, like, you can extract this information from the world, right? You can determine where the lane boundaries are. You can figure out what traffic lights associate to your lane. But I think at a certain point, like, why would you? Like, taxi drivers back in the day in London, you know, originally before we had Google Maps, they would have to memorize every single street in the city in order to get anywhere. And so you would have to basically be really, really good at that area in order to get anywhere. And then Google Maps came onto the scene, right? And this is maps, this takes mapping, and this sort of really helped demolish the industry of taxi drivers, because now anyone has access to this mapping information that tells you how to get from one place to another. And I think this is sort of the logical extension of that. Why not have it be easier? We do depend on the map, I won't, you know, deny that, but it makes your driving experience better. You can do things like predict 5 lanes in advance, what lane's gonna turn into like a protected turn or not. You can do optimization based on that. You know, I've been in so many situations where I'm like, oh, I need to turn left up ahead, but I didn't realize that this dash lane turns into a solid lane, so I end up like swerving over the white lane to get into the turn lane, right? That happens all the time. So I think, like, you're right in the sense that we rely on the map, but I don't think it's right to say that we shouldn't, because I think you can do better than a human if you have this information.
I'm just wondering if that limits your scalability or your ability to roll out to new communities if you have to go in and, you know, do detailed.
Yeah, it takes time. Yeah, it takes time to map things, but, you know, since the physical infrastructure of a city changes if you have a lot of construction, which takes money, or destruction, which takes like a natural disaster of war, like you shouldn't need to do a lot of ridiculous stuff after you've already created the map. It's mostly updates at that point. Yeah.
You kind of mocked the turn signal that had the little moving strip in it, but later when you had the lights under the car, you were talking about communicating things using the lights. And
Yeah.
I've heard people suggest having the brake lights flash for really hard braking. I wondered if you have other ideas about communicating with other drivers or other cars in that way.
Yeah, there's a lot of really interesting stuff that we're gonna do, but I think some part of it is gonna be a conversation between us and the lawyers. So, yeah, there's ideas, but I think we're trying to patent them right now, so I can't say. How about you?
Can you talk a little bit about your localization and how it deals with changing weather and changing seasons? Is it sensitive to snow on the ground?
Yeah. Can I talk about our localization and how sensitive it is? We've driven in the rain, and we're driving in snow and in these sort of desert conditions in our other offices, and it localizes. So, you know, I'm not going to say that's perfect. There's always failure cases, but it does pretty well right now. There's always room for improvement.
We actually, so what we do is like we localize on the ground mostly, what was our first version. But now we actually started to do ICP, like point cloud alignment in 3D. Even if you have snow on the ground, as long as you have landmarks around you, you can still find stuff. So
what about the fog? What about the fog?
Well, if you don't see anything,
how does a human drive if they can't see anything?
You still have like head reckoning and odometry to guide you some way, but that is going to drift over time.
I was curious about changing geometry, like as trees lose their leaves for the winter, the scene can look quite different.
I mean, there's always going to be some amount of error in your localization. I think so far it's been good enough for what we do, but obviously as we encounter all those edge cases, it might be a problem because we depend on the localization just so heavily. We need to know where in the road we are exactly to use a map. Otherwise, if we think we're like 50 meters ahead, we're in trouble, right? So yes, this is a challenge.
Thank you.
Cool. You in the back, I guess.
So you showed a lot of dash cam data about cameras on the sides and looking from the back.
We have them. Yeah, we just didn't show them because it's easier to see what's going on when you have that.
Specifically for like collision avoidance and prediction of erratic behavior, somebody coming to slam into you, and if you can just talk about the strategy around that, and also like the camera types, the field of view for each one.
I'll send you a full bomb. So details about our camera setup. I'll say that we do have 360-degree coverage. We do care about everything around us, but we only show the front camera because it's more intuitive for people to understand, especially in a presentation like this. I would say that this is one of the things that really distinguishes self-driving cars from human drivers, because the LiDAR sees 360 degrees, the cameras see 360 degrees. They don't get tired. They're always processing, right? Like, you know, human has natural attention mechanisms, not only just because of their neck and where they're pointed, but also their eyes have attention mechanisms, right? But there is no attention mechanism here because it sees everything. And because of that, it can account for obstacles that a human driver might not see because they're not looking behind them when they're doing a lane change or a turn or something like that. But yeah. How about you?
What do you do about potholes?
What do we do about potholes? So that's an interesting problem right now. I don't know if we map them. That's a question for another team. I think we might, but yeah, I don't really know. That's sort of a different team's domain. Yeah. So, you over there?
What kind of compute platform are you using today?
What kind of compute platform are we using? I don't know how much I can say about this, but it's pretty beefy and it's in the trunk.
Does an electric car with water cooling help?
What's that?
Does an electric car with battery water cooling help?
Oh, does an electric car? Yeah, totally. Like, the electric car is great. You know, it's got its own built-in power supply. Yeah, it's got like stuff like water cooling and stuff like that. Yeah, the electric car definitely helps. It's also just, it has a lot of other advantages. The controls is a lot easier because you don't have to like switch gears as you're going faster or slower. It's also just more efficient in general just because you're in a city environment, you're going at generally low speeds, and you can always return to a charging station, so it's more efficient for the fleet overall, things like that. Yeah. I'll choose you over here.
You guys published your data on DMV, which is quite incredible, 50 miles of driving without any human intervention on average. Could you qualify more about that?
Could I talk more about...
There's no detailed information.
could I qualify more about the DMV takeover information?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I would say that like, I think unlike a lot of other companies who do moderately urban driving, all this stuff is in just really dense areas like this. So I would say that like miles per disengagement is not a really accurate term of someone's, accurate descriptor of someone's ability in terms of their technology, because when you're driving in a city, you go slower, but you encounter more things, and you cover less distance overall, even though you're encountering more challenging situations per mile. So I would say that it's not entirely fair to look at that and say like, oh, you know, they're better or worse just because they have this rate of disengagements. I think it's more like we have some stuff on the safety team that I think more accurately captures some of that. So yeah. You got a question?
Yeah. In the transition for cars between manual driving and autonomy, do you think some of the autonomous or like data collection, like some of the stuff that's the data gathered for autonomous for like mapping autonomous driving could be used for sort of AR displays, like a display like an AR for cars in the near future?
For manual cars, you're saying?
Yeah, for like semi-autonomous cars.
Okay. Could the mapping data that we collect be used for assisting manual driving? Yes. Okay. Yeah, the answer is yes, but I don't know if we're really interested in doing that. Yeah, so you'd have to find someone who has that data and is interested in doing that, but yeah. Choose you.
So two quick questions. One, you guys mentioned that you have that Cruise to Work program where you'll pick up employees autonomously. Do you guys have any plans to open it up to the public in the near future, sort of show people what's happening as it's still in development? And two, in keeping with some of the questions, can you please go into detail about the full hardware stack?
Okay, so the first question, are we going to make Cruise to Work public? I really want to. That's up to leadership. I know we're planning to at some point to do a beta launch, but I'm not really sure about the timing or what point in our development that would be feasible. But we probably could, and it wouldn't be too bad of experience right now. I just don't know what the business goals of that would be. It would probably be more for publicity or for like doing a shakedown of your entire like self-driving and routing and rider experience stuff. But you know, that depends on the strategy, and I don't really know. And I'm going to ignore your second question. I don't know what you want me to say. Like, yeah.
Are you working on semi-autonomous driving at all, where there's some component of manual driving and some handover to the
Are we working on semi-autonomous driving? So, you know, we started off with that, right? We started off with the highway autopilot, which is supposed to be semi-autonomous driving. And as you explore the problem more, you see that like level 4 is kind of a dangerous myth. Level 4 being like, oh, you can handle most situations, but can tell a person to take over with some amount of time. It's just not there. Like most of the time, human drivers are inattentive, and especially when they turn on the system, and then suddenly you're expected to take over within a second or 2 seconds. Like it's just not. I don't think it's safe. So we're not interested in that right now. Yeah. You also had a question?
So what kind of speed limits do you follow? Like, is it based on the speed limit of the road or on the perception? Like, for example, when there are construction zones, there would be reduced speeds. So do you follow those?
Yeah, how do we choose our speed? So yeah, you know, number one is the speed limit of the road legally. 2 is considerations like how narrow the roads are, and you know, like before we said we drive a little slower around like double parked cars and construction zones, stuff like that. So yeah, we absolutely do all that. We also do it for hills. When you are cresting a hill, you actually have a lot of blind spot there because you don't see over the crest of the hill. So we slow down a little bit as we get up to the top of that so we don't accidentally hit something that we didn't see before. Yeah, so we spent a lot of time on that.
Yeah, when you have a lot of these cars eventually on the road, won't the LiDAR systems interfere with each other?
So yeah, will the LiDAR systems interfere with each other when there's a lot of cars on the road? We actually have a lot of cars on the road, and you saw that cameo before of the other car. They're fine. They're fine.
We actually had this instance where 2 LiDARs were like in sync, spinning at each other, and they were flashing at each other. So I had to, like, sure they're like.
That was like before we had phase lock, yeah. In the back.
So I have a question regarding the speed limit. So there's places where the speed limit is X, but then clearly everybody drives always faster than the speed limit. Well, what do you do in that case? Because the passengers could get bored or frustrated.
Do we violate the speed limit? We will always do the safest thing. You know, it's actually like those double parked cars are doing something illegal. But it's also illegal to depart your lane boundaries to get around them, right? But you can't sit behind this double parked car forever. So it's the safest thing to do, I think. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So I think I see you depend on the neural network a lot, right? Especially CNN and maybe other networks. But we have a very, up till now, as far as I know, have a very limited understanding of how to interpret the intermediate layers of that. Suppose, like, for example, the traffic light example you show, there's a special case of occur. How fast or how can you effectively take that error and to fine-tune a network, and how that's as kind of a deployable when there's like a different city, you have different cases. How to interpret that? I think that's some question, because I'm asking, let's say the Tesla accident, there's a kind of investigation going on, you have to present a report. How you test your system and how you guarantee it's a safe procedure that you are following, and in the industry you have the ISO 26262, things like that, right? How do you guys kind of interpret using the neural network to deal with this kind of problem?
How do we make neural networks safe or validate that they're safe and handle edge cases? So one part of that is you have to collect a lot of data. And the advantage of having a fleet of cars is that they're all driving, they collect a lot of data individually, so you already have that data pipeline sort of flowing in. So a lot of what we do is building the infrastructure and the process to be able to convert that data into labeled data that you can use for insights for validation. There's sort of a broader question of like, you know, how do you interpret neural nets and stuff like that. That's something I leave to the safety team in terms of how that translates into how we affect regulation. But I will comment that when you have these systems that a lot of people in the industry are doing, like, you know, end-to-end self-driving cars with neural nets that go from perception input to direct steering action, I don't think those are safe. I think that there's so much dimensionality of your input, and there's so much behavior that you have to learn in the middle of the network that you can't validate it end-to-end like that. I think you have to break it up into different components. So you
guys have a kind of hybrid solution with the traditional computer vision plus the neural network is kind of. That's what
well, like, you know, you can break up problems into more discrete components that you can validate separately. So if you change something, you don't have to redrive 5 million miles to make sure that it's actually safe now. So that's important.
How do you look at parameters, both external and car capabilities? For instance, could be oil on the road or ice. Secondly, you could be trying to bypass a double parked car, and each vehicle that you will support, including Corvettes, will have different capabilities to accelerate or brake. And so how do you parameterize that in your decision making?
How do you parameterize road conditions and vehicle variability? Is that what you're saying?
If there's oil on the road, I may not be as willing to pass a double parked car when another car is approaching it, and it depends on the distance and the speed of that car. But my own car may have good acceleration and good brakes and good tires. So you're going to parameterize that different on a Corvette versus a Bolt.
Well, I would say, so how would you parameterize the controls action of cars that you see? I think, like, you know, if you're trying to control the car yourself, that makes a huge difference. You have to characterize it very carefully. But right now, we're not really targeting different platforms apart from the Bolt. I would say for cars that you perceive in the world, I don't think a human would necessarily know, okay, like, this is the way that this car handles necessarily, right? You would assume that people would do sane behavior regardless of how their car's like control action works. I would say the other thing is that humans don't have really good velocity estimation because they don't have really good position estimation. So when you have like a really dangerous scenario for humans is if you're coming up at like high speed, 60 miles an hour behind a car that is braking, you know, like someone said before, there's no action, there's no signal to say that this is braking really, really hard. And because humans have really bad position estimation, they have bad velocity estimation, so they can't tell that this thing's braking really hard. Whereas the LiDAR, the radar, you know, the camera system, they have really fine-grained, like, you know, like less than a meter per second accuracy of what something's velocity is going to be. And so when you have that, I think you get a lot more leeway in terms of, okay, like we know that even though this guy is going to have, different control action based on the type of car, you can see it a lot quicker, and you can see the velocity pick up a lot quicker. You can estimate the acceleration from like your observations, stuff like that. So it creates a lot more leeway, I think.
Maybe one more question, and then we'll have the reception next door here, and we'll have some more members of the team. So if anybody still has questions, you can talk to these guys.
I'll be really careful. Everyone who wants to ask a question, raise your hand. And
What will be?
He doesn't even. Okay, whoa. I admire your boldness, but that was out of line, man. I'm sorry.
I just had a question about something you hinted at before with regards to machine learning for the driving policies. So I was going to ask, is machine learning in your system solely responsible for sort of detecting objects and estimating where they are? Or are you also using it at all in the driving policies? It seemed like from your talk you were mostly talking about, in this situation we had to decide to turn around the double parked car.
Yeah.
So that seems to hint to me that it's maybe more human crafted policy.
Yeah, so like what part of our decision-making process and what part of our sort of downstream planning processes use machine learning? There are some sections that use machine learning. It sort of depends bit by bit. I think like the state-of-the-art neural networks, it's actually hard to tell a network to do something. For example, like you want to route to a certain destination. That's something where I don't think neural nets are really well constructed for that. But we do use neural nets downstream from like or not neural nets, just machine learning in general, downstream from the pure image processing. But the visualizations are less cool, so I can't show them here. Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That was awesome.